right, good morning, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. I wanted to wait just a few extra minutes to see if anybody else was going to join our group. I know that there was a big session this morning, and I know we had that 30-minute break, and just I know sometimes it takes a minute to come back and get coffee or whatnot. So yeah, so if we can go ahead and get started. Thank you so much. So as you guys know, this is the breakout session E, Housing and the Built Environment, the Key to Thriving Communities. I am Hannah Curlin. I have been with the City of Charlotte in the Housing and Neighborhood Services Department for the past 3 years. I am the Lead Safe Program Manager, former graduate from UNC Charlotte's Master's in Public Health program, as well as the Health Informatics program, graduated there in 2017. And I would like to also introduce my co-host, Rachel Stark. Rachel, if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure thing. So I'm Rachel Stark. I'm a senior urban designer and landscape architect for the City of Charlotte. I'm part of the Urban Design Center, which is within the Planning, Design, and Development Department. We are housed over actually on South, and I don't know if you know Bland Street Station, but we're really convenient and accessible. And once COVID-19 is over, we would love to be able to open up our doors and make this a place where we are co-creating the city with the community. I've been with the city for almost 5 years. Before that, I worked for private firm in South Africa for 3 years. And before that, I was in the city of Raleigh. And then skipping back a few years before then, I graduated from NC State with a master's in landscape architecture, and my undergrad is environmental science. And I'm really excited to see all of you here. And Hannah, I think I'm kicking it over to you next. Is that correct?
Yeah. Great. All right. Marcus, if you'll go to the next slide, please. Great. So quick overview of our agenda today. We're going to do some introductions starting off, and then case studies, followed by group work framing for 10 minutes. And then we're going to break out into these brainstorming sessions with people, process, and product. And then we're going to take some time after that to kind of prioritize and combine what we had worked out in those brainstorming sessions, and then afterwards kind of combine that all together and report out. And as you guys know, this afternoon around 2 o'clock, each one of these groups are going to have this combination proposal out talking about each one of these different sessions are our overarching question, and of course here we're talking about housing and the built environment and the implications on health. So if you guys want to introduce yourselves in the chat, what I would love to see is your name, maybe either if you're a student or if you're currently working or whatever you're doing right now, and maybe just a few more things about yourself. If you're here in the Charlotte area or surrounding counties, would love for you guys to kind of connect with each other in the chat at this point. So we'll leave a couple of minutes now for that to happen. All right, wonderful. Thank you guys. Looks like a lot of people within the healthcare field. Wonderful. And also from locals and then also surrounding counties. So this is great. All right, great. Next slide, please. And leave it to you, Rachel, and I'll mute.
All right, so to get us started, I'm just going to do a little bit of framing of Mecklenburg County. You all are most likely familiar with the Quality of Life Explorer online, where you can see a lot of different data points, and if not, it's available in the resources for this session. And I just pulled a data set screenshot of age of death in Mecklenburg County. And what you see in dark blue, those are the neighborhood planning areas where the age of death is higher. And then the lighter green blue on the left-hand side of the area is where the age of death, average age of death, is quite a bit lower. And so what you start to see is this pattern around Mecklenburg County, and many of you, especially those of you who are familiar with Mecklenburg County, probably know that term crescent versus wedge. And that southern portion is what's referred to as the wedge, and then the crescent or the arc is the area surrounding it to the north, east, and south, especially in Charlotte. Once you go to the northern part of the county, it starts to get a little bit darker blue, but within 485 especially, it is a lighter color. And so what you'll see is if you're to select those areas, the average age of death in the crescent is 79, and then 67 for the crescent area. So pretty stark difference. And so it's 12 years difference in average age of death. And so as health professionals, I know that for you, it's very important to see, like, what are the factors into this age of death and how do we make it more equitable? You can go to the next slide, Marcus. So a couple of things. If you were to look at some of the data of the crescent and wedge, and if you look on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see a couple of things. One, you can see there's a racial segregation happening in the city. Right now, you have also a income disparity that's happening in the city that really reflects that age of death and crescent wedge pattern very well. And that's really tied to some of the things that we've done as a city in the past, and we weren't always this segregated. So on the left-hand side, I don't know if everyone's familiar with Tom Hanchett's book, Sorting Out the New South City, but it's a great resource, and it's specific to the city of Charlotte. It's specific to Charlotte and how Charlotte became a segregated city. It points back to the fact that after the Civil War, pre-Civil War and after the Civil War, just those first few decades after the Civil War, Charlotte was not a segregated city. You had people of different classes, people of different races, all intermingled, and that's what those different dots are reflected there on the left-hand side. And that image is from census data from 1875. Well, around the late 1800s, there was a populist party that won a state seat in North Carolina. That upset a lot of folks, the ruling class, if you will, the wealthy in the community, and those who own newspapers, etc. And there was a huge drive, a white supremacy drive, to really start to drive a wedge between those who are poor, white versus black. And there's just a lot of terrible articles if you were to go back in the papers and see that. And again, you can check out this book to read more about it. But what really solidified that segregation happening through that drive in the early 1900s is that there are a bunch of federal policies that really iron things out. So in 1935, basically between the 1920s and the 1940s, there were across the country, cities were coming up with these homeowner loan corporation maps so that they could get federal dollars to support home ownership. So FHA you might be familiar with if you've ever gone to buy a house, but those loans were the first time that was intended to make home ownership more accessible. So instead of having to have the money outright to buy a property, you could get a loan from banks, and you only had to have 20% down payment to get that access. So that was what FHA was set up to do. However, the way it was applied were a couple of things. One is that they had these maps set up. These they're typically called redlining maps these days. And there is a great resource on the University of Richmond website. So if you want to see what other cities' redlining maps look like, you can check that out. Some of these resources, again, are in the resource tab. But what you see in this map right here are areas that are highlighted in red. And typically, if you were to dig into the data, and again, University of Richmond has a list of why these are classified as being the hazardous areas. And for example, if you look right to the northeast side of Charlotte, there's a red area, which is now Optimus Park and then what's called NODA now. And that area was really mostly industrial. That's where the rail lines were. There was a lot of factories along that area. So it's industrial classification, and the fact that people live there near the factories set up by the factory workers. They basically set up these villages where it was very nuclear. And in the end, it ripped off a lot of people who were working at these factories. But then if you look at the north side, there's also a red area, and that wasn't because it was an industrial area. That area that's marked in red was defined as hazardous because using all those racial segregation tools of the early 1900s, they said this area has a predominance of Black owners and Black residents and Black owned businesses, which they said, well, this is an area that people won't want to invest in, so don't lend money to this area, to people trying to move into this area. And on top of that, in addition to the mapping piece, there was a whole racial segregation of if you're white, and there's different kinds of whites in these maps, like Italian versus Irish, English, etc. Asians are in there, those who are indigenous, those who are Black. They classified everybody and said, based on your race, your color of skin, your ethnicity, that is how they would define if you were eligible for a loan or not through the FHA. So obviously very racist, very segregated in how it was set up. And then the area in green is Myers Park. And that was classified as the best area because it was an area where it's predominantly white, very wealthy, and also they didn't have very many mixed uses. So something that some people are a little bit surprised at is the Elizabeth area and even close to Dilworth, that area was set aside as being yellow. And those areas were set aside as being yellow, which is definitely declining because they said this area is an area where there's a mix of uses. So what they wanted to see is if this is an FHA, so it's about home ownership, they didn't want to see a mix of uses. They only wanted to see housing and no other uses, just to have this stability for how they were going to allocate funds. So what's interesting from that is, yes, that determined who could get loans and who could own land and therefore build build their what is it called, their assets, so that you can accumulate wealth, which obviously impacts where we are today. But also the other thing that happened is a few years later, to be able to get federal funding and support from the state, you had to have zoning laws. So zoning laws were instituted in the 1940s across, well, in some places across America much earlier, but in Charlotte, it started in 1947. And so for them to be able to get the support from government, they had, and financial support, they had to create these zoning maps, again, to provide stability so that people knew what was an area for investing what in. And therefore just making it very predictable what was going where. So there was such a thing as a sure investment, as close as one as they could have. So in this area, again, you see green is this area. It's not just considered desirable, but that's the area that they zoned as single family. And you'll see there's not very many areas of green. Again, Myers Park area, there's a little bit of Dilworth there. Then you have what is it called? Country Club Heights is zoned green for single family. But then the next level is multifamily. So those are the areas in blue, which is basically everywhere else that had predominantly housing, even though they were still single family homes. After that, you had neighborhood businesses, industrial, and central business district. So one of the things that I want to point out here is when I moved to Charlotte about 5 years ago, when I moved over into the Optimus Park area and rented a house for my dad, my brother, and my husband and my dog to stay in. And it was an area before Optimus Hall was there and before a lot of the investments were happening there. A lot of the houses were Habitat for Humanity houses, but we also had mill houses in the area. And anyway, with this area, there were some areas that were actually zoned as industrial, even though they were single family homes, and they had been single family homes since the 1900s. So what we saw happening is, because it was zoned industrial, with the transit-oriented development plan that came over it, which was policy saying this is an area that was going to support the new blue line that was going to come in, there was a lot of pressure for all the industrial area to change over to transit-oriented development, which is high density, which meant that houses were likely going to be torn down and turned into apartments, condos, mixed-use development, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but obviously that creates development pressure. So anyway, we can go to the next slide, Marcus. The last point I wanted to make with what we know is health impacts. So looking at, thinking again about the segregation that we see in Charlotte today, in the tops, sorry, on the left-hand side, for our left-hand side, you have the vulnerability to displacement. Obviously, gentrification is a big conversation. On one hand, people need and deserve new investments in an area, but nobody wants forcible displacement, whether that's because your rent is going up too high, or because you can't afford to own your house because taxes are going up, or you want to go from being a renter to an owner and the properties are too expensive, which I think is everywhere in Charlotte right now. So with that point, there's a couple of other maps here. We have environmental justice score. Again, blue is where it's going really well, and you can see predominantly on the east side and south side, it's pretty good. Going on to the west side and along the corridors like Independence, it's not as great. You don't have as many trees, for instance. And all of this information and what feeds into this information is in the Charlotte Future 2040 plan. So I recommend checking this out if you want to dig into the data a little bit more. You can also see access to housing opportunity. And so that's thinking about the diversity of housing, the ability to stay in your neighborhood, especially if you want to age in place. For example, when you're single, just out of school, you want something different than when you're a young professional, when you're married and have a dog, and then you want something different when you start a family, and then your family moves out and you want yet a different place to live in as you're retiring. And it might not be an entirely different place, and you might have some great connections in your neighborhood. So how do you maintain some of those social ties without having to move out of the county, for instance? Access to employment opportunity is on there. You can see obviously Uptown and the airport and the university area are big employment hubs. And then access to let's see, residential amenities, I believe is that says, but it's goods and services. So thinking about where grocery stores are, obviously that factors into health, access to health care, so pharmacy, hospitals, clinics, etc. What that's starting to look like. Marcus, you can go to the next slide. So I believe I'm going to kick this off and then hand it over to Hannah. So basically, housing affordability obviously is one of the big topics right now. One of the goals is that people should be spending no more than 30% of their income on housing and utilities for their house. I'm very lucky in that I am under 30%, but my father, who's a senior and he's on Social Security, he's spending more like 50% of his income, maybe 60% on housing. So the whole point of that is that you want to have money for other things, whether that's transportation, getting around town, whether that's savings, whether that's medical bills, whether that's helping a child out, going into school, whatever it is. Throughout your lifetime, the best practice or rule of thumb is 30% of income. And Hannah's going to talk about the median income and the role that plays in affordable housing. Basically, that's looking at the median income of the whole area of Charlotte. And then naturally occurring affordable housing is basically areas that they tend to be older. They tend to be, right now in Charlotte, they're probably like the housing from the 70s and 80s. Sometimes it is single family, but a lot of what we see right now is mostly multifamily, 2 or 3 story garden apartments. And then also a couple of things to be considering when we think about housing affordability, rent versus own. If you own, some of the challenges are obviously maintaining your property, making sure you're staying up to code. If you are renovating your property, that you can pull the permits, make sure it's safe for everyone to live in. And then renters, it can be very expensive in the end if you're just renting and can't be putting down to something that is your own long term. So challenges with both of those, and also national real estate trends. Right now, especially with COVID-19, a lot of folks are saying, well, why would I pay the rent living in New York City when I can live in Charlotte for a lot cheaper? I could even own a house in Charlotte for a lot cheaper. So the things that are happening nationally and even internationally impact our local real estate market. And I don't know if anyone's tried to buy a house recently, but even when I was trying to buy a house 4 years ago, I think I put in offers in like 10 different places and finally got one, but it took a long time to get to that point. And I often lost out to higher bidders and cash buyers. And then let's see, stage of life housing needs. We talked about that a little bit earlier. And then city roles and resources. So we have this housing trust fund, home ownership, support resources such as Safe Home, emergency home repair, down payment assistance program, et cetera. And I'm going to kick it over to Hannah to talk about some of those.
Wow, thank you so much, Rachel. Okay, yeah, so and as we're seeing kind of coming back to those the national real estate trends, we are seeing elderly people, people in their late 50s, 60s, 70s that are not selling their homes, not downsizing, but actually remodeling and repairing their homes. And so they're staying in 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom, 5-bedroom homes because it is not economically possible right now for them to sell their homes and find something smaller that is affordable for them. And so unfortunately, as we all know, that is decreasing the number of affordable homes in the Charlotte market. Elderly people are staying in their big homes and just redoing a kitchen, upgrading their bathrooms, their decks, whatever, that kind of thing. So you're seeing this huge disparity between, young families that need more space or want to own their own home, have a yard, that kind of thing, and elderly people who just aren't moving out of these areas. And so as of right now, within the Charlotte market, we're just seeing a huge gap of homes on the market. So kind of going into the city resources, and that's more of my forte. So the Housing Trust Fund, we've got numerous corporations that have donated money into the trust fund, along with matching from the city, and so making those dollars available for various different projects. And then the ownership support resources. So we've got the Charlotte housing program, where it's a down payment assistance program, the Safe Home Repair program, and then emergency home repair, and some other ones that I'll talk about more in detail with the next slide, please, Marcus. All right, great. All right, so quickly coming back to AMI. So these income limits are set by HUD every year. So come July, HUD will push a new matrix out to us, and it will kind of show this combination of, how many people are living in the home, and what your income is, and set that area median income limit. A lot of our housing programs have income limits as far as whether you would qualify or not. So for example, our Safe Home Repair program is 60% area median income or less. And just for example, a family of 4, 60% AMI is $50,100. And what we've seen, for at least the past 3 years that I've been here, and I'm sure the trend has been the same, is that those income limits keep moving up. So a lot of people's, salaries or wages stay the same. So more people are actually now qualifying for these programs, because they're not seeing an increase in wages. But for the area continues to gain more and more wealthy people. Those AMIs tend to move upwards. So 80% AMI, which is what my program, the Lead Safe program is, and that's a HUD-based program, and they set it at 80%. And so here in the Charlotte area is $66,800 for a family of four, as just an example. So the HUD sets these income limits that determine eligibility for assisted housing programs. So anything from like Section 8, the Housing Authority, Housing Choice Voucher, Section 202 for housing of the elderly, those types of things. And they use the median family income estimates and fair market rent for each of these metropolitan areas. So this particular matrix is obviously just going to be for Charlotte. Phoenix is going to look different. Atlanta will also look different, per the area of the country. Nearly 17 million US households pay half or more of their income on a place to live. That means nearly 1 in 7 families are denied that stability of a safe, decent, and affordable house. At the most basic level, what makes a home affordable comes down to, just basic math. So pretty much, taking your monthly rent or mortgage minus your take-home pay. And so you should be able to afford for those extra things. As we know, especially within the elderly, people who are housing insecure are having to choose between paying for prescriptions, paying for food, those types of things. Unfortunately, the city of Charlotte needs an additional 24,000 units of affordable housing to meet the current need, which we know is just continuing up, which means more than 55,000 Charlotteans don't currently have an affordable place to live. That's 3/4 of the Panther Stadium. So one of the resources that we've pushed out is the Housing Charlotte Framework. So you can check that out. It's I want to say like a 24-page PDF that kind of focuses on the expanding of the supply and preserving existing quality affordable housing. A little bit like what Rachel was talking about with the NOAA housing, naturally occurring affordable housing. And so one of our programs, the resources for developers. So if you look at this, the right-hand side of the slide, 5 blue slots down, resources for developers. So right now the city of Charlotte is collaborating with developers in order to buy these NOAA housing and in turn make them affordable, and either for low income people to buy them or low income people to rent them. And so that is just one of the innovative programs that the city is trying to do in order to help with this issue. Also, the House Charlotte Down Payment Assistance Program is an incredible program. So pretty much it gives, so people apply or they inquire about the program, and then they take financial classes and they learn all about how to buy a house, the various moving parts involved about securing a mortgage, looking at the math, right? And also about maintaining your home. And then they can qualify for various amounts of money depending on their income and their family size. And that's a down payment assistance. So I believe depending on where you're looking at, up to, I want to say $21,000 that we can give towards down payment assistance. And that also continues to move up, as well as we're finding more and more people are looking at homes that are more expensive, and therefore that down payment needs to also increase in order for them to secure those homes. So housing rehab, these are CDBG funded dollars. And so it's a community development block grant. And so this is our Safe Home Rehab program. It's pretty incredible in the fact that we are able to assist usually around 100 families every year. And so they can qualify for various repairs. Rehab specialists come into the home, they look at the scope of work that is needed based off of code violations, if you will, safety and health hazards. So we're looking at plumbing, we're looking at electrical. What does your roof look like? What is the structure of the home? You know, we go into the crawl space, we look at the attic. We also test homes that were built before 1978 for lead, and I'll get into that in a second. And so we write up this scope. Contractors that are vetted by the city bid out that work, and they go through our process. And so I would say 9 times out of 10 people are thrilled with our work, and then on occasion we get people who wish we could do more, but we are capped at $42,000. And unfortunately, kind of what Rachel had said before, maintaining your home is expensive. You know, when you have to replace a hot water heater or a roof, these are things that people unfortunately don't have the means or ability to save up for. And in some cases, like the emergency repair program, we're able to assist with these kind of very direct urgent needs. Your heat goes out, you've got a major plumbing issue, you can call us. We will inspect it, send somebody out and get it done real quick, which is another great program that we have. But, you know, unfortunately, if you've got somebody who's been in their home for 30 plus years, they're on a fixed income, disability, that kind of thing, a lot of times these things add up. And either they're able to be helped with us or some of our partners, like Habitat for Humanity. Blue Ridge Community Action does weatherization, so they're able to help with roof and window repair, that type of thing, or our rehab program. But if not, then a lot of times people get pushed out because they can't afford these repairs, or they live in really unsafe homes. And so that's where you kind of see this turnover where people are being displaced because their homes are in such a great state of disrepair that they just kind of, unfortunately, or they get, you know, families will inherit these homes and kind of inherit all these problems as well. So it's one of those things that we're actively trying to help and keep people in their homes. So my program, the Lead Safe program, is a HUD funded program. We inspect homes that were built before 1978. So if you can imagine, if your home was built in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, like the likelihood or incidence of you having lead-based paint obviously increases the older the home is. And so we have a number of older homes here in Charlotte that do test positive for lead-based paint. And if there are children under the age of 6 that reside or visit there frequently, then you can qualify for this program. And so we mitigate those hazards, trying to decrease the number of children exposed, pregnant women exposed, or God forbid, even poisoned by lead-based paint. So that is a grant that we've received from HUD for about the past 20 years. Also to keep people in their homes and keep them safe. Every single one of the homes that we use our dollars with, whether it's the safe home, lead safe program, and also we have this targeted program, which goes into 2 neighborhoods that are determined by the city council as areas of great need that we want to keep the current residents in. We go through an entire assessment with them, a healthy homes assessment. We assess 29 different health and safety hazards. And if we have the funds, we address them with those dollars. And if we don't, then we provide the education and resources for those homeowners and even landlords to say, hey, you know, we noticed you've got chemicals that are not locked up in these cabinets, or even something like plugins. I know a lot of you guys are in the healthcare field, and the Glade plugins, air fresheners, that kind of stuff are actually respiratory. My brain. So anyways, but they can trigger asthma episodes, or you know, can obviously hurt people's, breathing issues, make it worse. Quality of indoor air quality is a major issue that we are trying to address as well at this point. All right, long-winded. Marcus, if you will continue on to the next slide, please. Great. All right, so aging in place initiatives. So this has been a big focus for the City of Charlotte's Housing Department, is to help elderly residents stay in their homes. So whether it's the Safe Home Program or this Aging in Place program that we also have to help people, age gracefully, safely in their home. So we're also looking at doing repairs such as widening doorways, right? We are looking at maybe making a half bath on the first floor, a full bath, so that grandma can doesn't have to go all the way upstairs to take a shower or that kind of thing. Kind of looking at it from what their current needs are, anticipated needs are going to be, and making those accommodations, temporary ramps, making sure that the front stoop, that the brick steps, these types of things are in good condition, that there's a sturdy railing that people can carry, that if there are entryway rugs and trip hazards, anything like that, we are looking at it with that kind of scope or lens on, so that we can make these areas safer, and so that people don't trip, fall, end up in the ER, end up in nursing assistance kind of situation, and therefore get pushed out of their homes. We want to make sure that they stay safe. So between these programs, and then also, as you guys might be aware of, the county has the elderly and disabled tax exemption type of program. So as long as their income doesn't exceed 150% of the income eligibility limit, then we can kind of hopefully alleviate areas where they would be either financially strapped or be placed in a hazardous condition, that they would be either forced out of their home or worse. So the city has lots of these programs. We are also currently looking at expanding these programs as well. We're looking at doing more work with asthma, children who have asthma. As you guys may know, North Carolina has some of the highest rates of pediatric asthma cases, especially with Black and brown children, children of color. So we're looking at those initiatives and those types of programs, as well as doing a lot more with data analysis and looking at the social rate of investment as well. So looking at doing more data collection and saying, okay, what type of repairs is the city doing that is really impacting people's health outcomes the most? When we talk about HVAC systems, when we're talking about plumbing issues, which might lead to mold and mildew, those types of things. So we're finally kind of getting to the point where the city is putting more of a health perspective on these housing programs. So combining the two, and really taking big steps forward with local community partners, our healthcare systems, so that we can continue to build on these programs and make our case point that these are important. So we can talk more about that later, potentially in breakout sessions. So Marcus, if you'll move on to the next slide. Rachel, if you want to talk about violent crime.
Yes. So I'm quickly just going to talk about some of the violent crime reduction. Obviously, that's something that comes up when we talk about longevity and health outcomes, and it can be a vicious cycle to be in a state of violent crime. And there's a lot of factors where it feeds onto each other. But I basically just wanted to share a little bit of work that we did before in the past year around trying to reduce violent crime reduction holistically. So our goal is to co-create solutions with the community to holistically and sustainably reduce crime in priority areas. We're looking both at the physical and social context of these situations. So physical context, such as is this placing, attracting, or facilitating violent crimes, looking at things like jobs, housing, and access to amenities. And the other thing is social construct, how are individuals' health in this area? The things that Hannah was just talking about in terms of asthma, and perhaps there's other aspects, not just physical, maybe it's also mental health aspects. Looking at relationships. Our relationships with our neighbors and family are very important. Relationships from school, colleagues, etc. Stability of housing, income, and community are also factors in the social aspect of an area. City roles and resources, obviously we have the police, we have the emergency call center, we have code enforcement, zoning, land use, which these sort of things feed into the physical aspect, coordination with NCDOT, city maintained streets, we have public transit, neighborhood services, placemaking, commercial development, public utilities, economic development, small businesses support, etc. And these are all tools and things that the city does that feeds into either addressing the physical aspect and or social aspect of the area. Obviously, we need the county at the table because you all are doing really important work around the social aspect. More work and know it better than we do here at the city, when a lot of our focus in most of the departments are on the physical aspects. So other partners, obviously working with you all, but also Parks and Rec is an important piece. Also working with private owners, whether that's property managers or just privately owned properties that need maintenance, etc. Marcus, if you could go to the next slide. So we recently did a project on Sugar Creek and I-85. We have a sprint report that we can make accessible if you haven't seen it yet. But basically it's using a public health lens to look at the Sugar Creek and I-85 interchange, which is an area that's experienced high violent crime rates. Also throwing in here, we've done a lot of research just to see what are some of the physical aspects. So Hannah has this image from her program of the LIDS hazard control unit work that's been done in the area along Sugar Creek. Marcus, you can go to the next slide. Thank you. Complete neighborhoods, obviously that's another important factor. So one of the things that I'll talk about in a second is the Charlotte Future 2040 plan. One of the goals is 10-minute neighborhoods, and that's not necessarily 10-minute walks. It could be a 10-minute bike ride or 10-minute transit. And this is kind of how I live. My husband and I share a vehicle, and he's a soccer coach and director. And so typically he's the one with the car, and I get to take the bus or bike to where I need to go. Or walk. And so being able to get from your house to parks, retail in a way that's walkable, bikeable, or making sure that you can get there by transit really quickly. We don't want to see like 2-hour bus rides to go get groceries, because groceries don't stay that long, especially in summer. Economic opportunities and jobs are other things that we'd like to see folks have access to in a 10-minute radius. Some of the considerations are that there are obviously different neighborhood contexts. There are some neighborhoods where maybe people just don't want, would like to have their 5 different cars, and that's fine. But just the other thing to consider is real estate pressure in this. Right now, the most complete neighborhoods where you do have that 10-minute access are probably the hottest neighborhoods right now in terms of just real estate trends. And so everybody wants to live in one of these. So a question is, how can we create more of these potentially? And then also looking at city resources and roles. So again, we have future land use. which is looking at desired development that we want to have, that the community wants to have in the area, looking at zoning, which is how the future land use is the policy side, that is the guidance of where we want to go, and that's worked out with the community. The zoning regulations are the tools to get there. That's the legal tools to implement those projects. Capital investment, infrastructure, obviously is a key piece to what the city does. And then programs, we have housing and neighborhood programs that we've talked about. We also have placemaking grants and city-led projects. We have business matching grants that economic development department leads up. And we also have, of course, job provider recruitment with economic development. Next slide, please. So Charlotte Future 2040 plan, if you haven't seen this yet, definitely go check it out. It's online. They have a virtual open house if you want to check that out, or you can just go through the plan, the document online on your own. It also has the equity atlas in there if you want to find out a little bit more about Charlotte's history, and in a very quick format over like 2 or 3 pages, and how that's impacting us today. But coming out of this plan, there are 10 goals. Like I said, there's a 10-minute neighborhood goal, but there's several other goals that are related to each other. The other thing is we talked about the crest and the wedge, or the arc and the wedge. We talked in this work, we figured out, well, what are the things that are most similar between these two areas where we're seeing different outcomes, different health outcomes. We also see different race segregation, racial and economic segregation happening in Charlotte. So what's most similar between these areas and what's most different? So vulnerability displacement is probably the most aligned to this area. And then job density, job skill match, residential renovation. So what's happening in this area, size of commercial and proximity to financial services such as banks, fire response and proximity to grocery are some of the biggest differences between these two areas. But similarities are street connectivity, proximity to transit, sidewalk availability, and proximity to outdoor recreation. Where you do see those categories being different is more towards the center of Charlotte versus the outer edge of Charlotte. So as you go towards the outer edge of Charlotte, you might have less sidewalk availability. I can go to the next slide. Thank you. All right, last thing I'm going to cover is just an example of some of the work we've done. So we've talked about affordable housing. But part of it is just supply demand, right? So Hannah was talking about, we have a shortage of, I believe you said 55,000 people don't have an affordable place to live. We need 24,000 more units. That's a lot. And obviously this is a city that also values its trees. It's a city that has a lot of creeks. So that's potential flooding areas to be considering where we place housing. So we're trying to be creative and figuring out, well, how can we get this in a way that's not just a lot more apartments? Obviously, we're going to need a lot more apartments and condos and those higher density multifamily housing. But there's ways to get it into the neighborhoods as well. And some of that is duplexes and triplexes or quadplexes, and those are very common. Those were very common, especially in the early 1900s. And if you go to Wesley Heights or Elizabeth, or even in some cases on the edges of, or in Dilworth, you'll see some of these houses that are actually 2, 3, 4 units close to Uptown area, because that's when the area was built up. But even in Myers Park, you'll find these things called accessory dwelling units. It's basically, some people call them granny flats or in-law suites. But back in the day, they were allowed to be built for domestic workers. Those were the only times that you were allowed to build a second dwelling unit within your property. Obviously very classist, very racist as well. So in the end, in 2012, we changed the policies allowing ADUs to be built anywhere in the city. That being said, even though they are allowed by policy to be built anywhere in the city, there are some hurdles to actually seeing it built. So we didn't have very many built, and that's what the map on the right hand shows, is that since 2012, not that many units had been built. So we were trying to understand what were some of the hurdles to getting them built. And it turns out there were several barriers. One is there are some regulatory barriers, such as a 15-foot rear yard setback, that made it hard for some people to be able to build it. But the other thing is financial. So a lot of the banks aren't familiar with the kinds of loans that people need to be able to build these properties. So unless you had the money outright, it could be a little bit, or you knew the financial system really well, or worked with a really great financial advisor at the bank, it could be really hard to actually get to the point where you could get the loan to be able to build this accessory dwelling unit. We also had barriers such as HOAs. HOAs typically do not allow for any kind of more than one family per lot within most HOAs. So anyway, I also wanted to show on the left-hand side, you can see the areas in pink in Charlotte. So 84% of our land in Charlotte is zoned for single family homes. So if that's what we're allowing, we don't only have a little bit of land left aside from that for all the commercial, for all the multifamily dwelling units, etc. So that's a pretty, where we have like the most availability on single family property. But if we don't have the tools and the allowance to be able to build things like townhomes, duplexes, triplexes, and accessory dwelling units, it's going to be hard to fit in those needed units. So that is it for me. I'm going to kick it over to Hannah, and the next slide, please.
Okay, so our big question, and then we're going to break out into groups, is, how can we address community design, growth, and development to achieve better health outcomes? So we've kind of gone through the history, we've gone through some of the things that we're currently doing, but obviously we could be doing more, and innovation is going to be the best way to move forward with looking at different ideas and these types of things. So Rachel, I believe you have the capacity to share your screen and do the concept board, which I think we can move from there. But we're going to look at these. Marcus, if you'll move to the next slide, we're going to look at these 3 Ps. So we're going to look at people, process, and products. Yes. All right. So we're going to do group work. Sorry, I got ahead of myself. Group work, ideas and recommendations to address the built environment. We're going to move into these different breakout sessions, breakout groups, and kind of look at different ideas, right? Different strategies, address different needs, so that we can, how can we be doing things differently? How could we be doing things different, better? So,
shall I go ahead and share my screen or not yet?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, it's gonna kick Marcus off. Hold on one second.
So looking at these 3 Ps, right? So we're gonna look at the right people, the right roles, and the right environment. So that's gonna be one area we're looking at, people, and then the process, right? So, what processes can we look at that are efficient, equitable, effective, scalable, and sustainable? And then finally, looking at the product. So a coordinated system that we're going to maximize healthcare for all. What is going to be culturally appropriate? What is going to be responsive? What is going to be respectful? So Rachel, you want to explain how this works?
Yes, ma'am. So I am going to drop in the chat links to the concept boards. And I think one of the things Hannah and Marcus will need to see are who wants to be working in what group. We do want kind of a balance. So if we have like 10 people, well, we have 10 people here, I believe. So if we can get approximately 3 or 4 people per group, that would be great. But we have 3 different boards and I'm going to drop those links in. But let me just show you a little bit of what you should be able to do once you get into your concept board. So we have, it should open like this. If you can't see these boards, go over where it says the percentage at the bottom, click zoom and then hit fit. And that should make it so that you can see all the boards. And then what you can do is if you click on this little square with 3 lines, it opens up sections and you can start with the first board, which is welcome and assignment. So this is the question that you guys are going to be addressing. And then when you go, through this, there's instructions right at the top. So this should make it super easy. You'll need somebody who's going to help you keep time, make sure you're getting through this really quickly. And it's intended to be very time boxed and very quick. But that sounds stressful, but don't worry. Like if you don't have 6 ideas, then you have 3 ideas, it's fine. But you want to basically in the beginning set up as many ideas as you can. And to do this, what you're going to do is at the top, there is what's called sticky note, which is the square with 2.5 lines and a little turned up corner. So if you click on that, you can pick a color. Any of these colors doesn't matter too much. You can use yellow. So you click on your color and then you just click once and it's going to drop a square in there and you'll have the typing text and you can type whatever you want is your idea. So type in your idea and you want to come up with as many as possible. So just 2 things, drop in your favorite ideas, put your name at the top as the first thing. Sorry, I should have said that at the beginning. And to put in your name, you can do the same thing with a sticky note, or if you click on the text tool at the top, draw a text box and you can say your name at the top. So that way everyone knows what area they're working in. And in those 6 minutes, you're just going to come up with as many ideas as you can possibly think of, write them on sticky notes and place them under your name. And feel free to go outside of the board if you need to, if there's not enough space. All right, and then same thing, more instructions. This is one where you are going to self-select what was your favorite 2 or 3 ideas that you came up with, and then drop them under your name, which you're going to have to put your name in. Again, drop your favorite 2 or 3 ideas, and then you're going to talk about them. Every person is going to get 1 minute just to share out, 1 or 2 minutes, share out just what their idea was, and then you can start to group them as, like, for example, there might be some sort of theme emerging. Feel free to start grouping them, and again, that's all time boxed, and then you get to vote on them. To vote on them, you're going to go to highlighter at the top, click on highlight, pick a color. Actually, there's colors down here, so if you want to just write your name next to your color to remind you. And it doesn't matter who has what color, obviously, just pick a color, write your name next to your color, so that way people know whose color that is, that it's already been chosen. And then you go up here to highlight and click on that color. So that looks like that teal blue. And you'll have that little highlighter and you're just going to click once and it's going to drop a little dot in there. So don't hold it because it makes a line, but if you click once, it'll drop a little dot, and that's how you're going to vote. Let me delete my name so I'm out of your way. And then over here, the next thing you're gonna do, again, there's instructions at the top, but basically there are these quadrants where you're going to take the top voted on ideas up here, and you're going to drop them into these quadrants drop them into each of these boxes. So whatever the top 6 voted on ideas were, drop them here. Pull your sticky note, put it over here. And then everybody is, according to whatever highlighted color is, they're going to guess like what they think. Is this a high impact project, high effort project, or low impact, low effort? So you drop it into those quadrants. And I think I will be able to go into each of the breakout rooms and just check on how everybody's doing. So if you have questions, feel free. Then, okay, so one of the last things you're going to do, where it says decide or ignore this, you guys can decide on your own. But you can decide what are the top 2 ideas. One, an idea that's in a do now. So here, see if I can get my hand to work. This has a little bit of a instruction. So if you find something where a lot of the dots fall into this category, that's a do now project. If you find a lot of dots in this area, then that's a make a project. So then you're going to look at that and basically select the one with the most votes here, or not most, or your favorite idea from here, and your favorite idea where most of the dots fall in here, and you're going to drop it in here. And that's pretty much it, except for the fact that you'll need to find somebody who's going to report out from your group.
Sounds good.
All right, so people, what are your priority activities / resources, needs, strategy, etc., your ideas, I should say. So who was in the people group?
This is Cassandra Thompson. The majority of the time I was in the room by myself. So I did jot down a few ideas.
Okay.
One of them was creating feedback loops, including long-term residents. Can you hear me?
It's a little bit, it's a little bit muffled. Say the idea again.
Okay, I had to drop my mask. Okay, the idea was to create feedback loops, including long-term residents, about development projects. Because a lot of times the feedback comes from short-term residents, but not necessarily those folks who have lived in the community for years and years.
Okay, so feedback loops to include.
Long-term residents.
All right, long-term residents about development projects.
Yes.
Okay. Any other ideas for people?
Yes, there was also an idea to tie some form of Charlotte history in to kind of be a little bit more respectful of those who are already in the community.
So tie in
Like
more
I
Charlotte
like thinking of, yes, like some historical pieces along the development lines, like picking up the piece of railway in the East Boulevard corridor and putting that on display for a short time, or possibly doing like the landmarks that they have erected along Freedom Drive.
I think that's a great idea. I love it. Can you come work for the planning department?
I know, right?
So tie Charlotte history elements into development to be more
Yes, just to
respectful.
be respectful of the existing residents. One of the things from UNC Chapel Hill is that public health is not something that we do to people, it's something that we do with people.
Mm-hmm. I think those are great ideas. Cool. Do you have another idea or two that you really want to share, or should we go to process?
I think that is pretty much that's pretty much it.
Okay, those are some really great ideas. I love it. Like I said, come work for the planning department, please. All right, so built environment process. That group, what are your top ideas that you want to share in the session later?
Terry, did you want to share yours and then I can elaborate on the other one?
I was just basically saying that I think it would be a good idea to have I'm going to use the word centralized, or a place where you can go and see all of the properties that are available, whether they be for rental and or for purchase, but a centralized location, so that you won't have to be going on multiple search engines or whatever to look for that information.
Okay. So, like realtor.com, but do they have rentals? I don't think they have rentals, do they? Centralized place to see all properties available for rent or purchase. Okay. Another idea?
So Tara's idea was coupled with mine of a landlord registry.
Ooh, I would love that.
Yeah, same. So there's no way for us to know, what properties are for rent by whom, where, and accountability for those rental properties, making sure that they're safe and follow code.
Mm-hmm.
So that, that's kind of like listings available, and then this landlord registry, that was like a good partnership. And then our last idea was a policy that mandates and addresses, kind of population density or acreage and land preservation. So if you've got a development, if you've got 100 houses being built, then those people should also have access to
the open
park.
Space. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, open space. And also, I mean, you're clearing out land and you're pushing all of the inhabitants, the animals out from there, where we need some land preservation as well. So this combo of making sure that we've got enough trees, safe places to walk, exercise, that kind of thing. So something that puts us at the forefront of land preservation along with this development.
Okay, cool. Is there any others that you want to add, or is that good?
Those were our top 3.
Okay, cool. All right, Derek, do you want to speak for our group on product? If he's still here.
I actually have to step away quickly.
No worries. Hey, Derek, do you mind being the reporter later in the later session on this product piece?
If I can, I'm
Okay.
being pulled to another meeting.
Okay. And for backup, we have Cindy.
Okay.
All right. So built environment product. Since you have to step away, I'll go ahead and just add them. So I'll add one, and then Cindy, do you want to talk about transportation first? Cindy, are you there?
I'm sorry. Yeah. Yeah, we were just saying that, as something we can do now, maybe fairly quickly, is make sure that people in communities have access to transportation where they can, attend community health events, clinics, things like that.
Like vaccination?
Yeah, that'd be a good one.
Okay, and then the other idea that we shared, and well, we had 3 really. So one is create a financial aid service for people wanting to build ADUs that have barriers to loans now. And ADUs, again, are those accessory dwelling units, or granny flats, or in-law suites. Build ADUs. And those barriers, again, are things like just having access to capital or working with an agent that knows how to get the right kind of loan that they would need. And potentially that's something that even the city could help support, especially if it's to provide affordable housing for somebody. Okay, and then the other idea was Derek's idea, and it was to provide simple interest loans. Sorry, provide simple interest loans to allow homeowners to pay off their homes quicker. Because it's a little bit complicated right now. And because there may be people who don't qualify for some of the services that are out there because they may be under a 15 or 20-year mortgage. And so they don't have their house completely paid off to be able to get some of this service, some of the things that the city provides or the county provides to support them to stay in place. To allow, sorry, I'm doing 2 things at once. Okay. So I think that's it. We're up next now. Hannah, are you covering this slide?
Yeah. Honestly, thank you guys all for coming into our breakout session today. We're gonna go on a lunch break, and then we'll be back at 2 o'clock. We're gonna do so each one of, I think there was 5 breakout sessions, and so everybody's gonna report out. I think if you looked at all the different ones, they all sound very interesting. So everybody's gonna report out about these ideas they came up with at 2 o'clock. 3:45, we'll have a panel discussion and these closing remarks. And then obviously we have more links for you if you have any interesting questions, comments, that kind of thing. You're welcome to contact them. But on behalf of Rachel and myself, we really appreciate you guys coming today. I think these ideas are going to be great, and it's going to be instrumental, at least for progress with the city and for our work, because I know we will take all these back. UNCC is going to be presenting this as well. And I'm pretty much telling, you know, the city and our council members and these types of people, you know, there are ways that we can be doing this better and helping, you know, improve the health of our residents and people moving down here.